Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to APMP Colorado Chapter webinar series. I'm Abby Halder. I'm your program's chair. And today I am joined by Josh Thiel of Hinz Consulting. He's leading the AI Center of Excellence, and he is a thought leader in the industry when it comes to researching, consulting, and training in AI technology. He's had a 21-year military career with the Special Forces. He's an author, advisor at Purdue, and pursuing a doctorate in technology innovation. So thank you so much, Josh, for making time out of your busy day to come talk to the Colorado chapter members and how we navigate this AI world that we live in. So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Awesome.
And I just threw out our first poll here, see where the attendees are sitting. It looks like we have a lot of W2s on the line.
Yeah, and so we're going to be taking a few polls today too, just to get a feel for everybody and know what everybody's doing out there. I'll start off with just a quick introduction. Thank you so much for the short introduction, but like, how did I get here? What happened, right? A little bit about me is I was a special operations guy for a long time. And in 2011, I met the love of my life, and it was called technology. And I found out, wow, we can do some amazing things with technology that just makes life better for everybody. And when I stopped and think about it, it's like, man, that's kind of all the inventions throughout time that humans have been doing forever, right? Like, and I frequently say, or I would say to my units, everything that is now was once a dream. The new proposal process for your company is a dream in someone's head right now, right? AI technology was a dream. Star Trek communicator became the cell phone, right? Everything that is now was once a dream, and that's what's so amazing about humans. And when I take that piece for a second and pull it out, I'd say don't think that AI is going to replace you too. We'll start that, just get that out right out of the way, because AI doesn't create like humans. AI generates. And when you're talking about GenAI, what it really is, it's a high-end probability wheel, and we're going to get to that in a second. And so I had this tech and this love affair, right? Realizing that, we can make life better with tech. I did an internship with Palantir, some high-end Intel platform stuff. And wow, I was able to like protect my people more. I was able to do more by adding in technology. And then I was a commander and the evangelist for technology. And when you're the commander and the evangelist, stuff actually gets done, right? And you allocate funds towards it. So we made all these big changes. I got paralyzed in 2021, and they started to rebuild me like RoboCop. I'm dating myself there. If you know the reference, that means you're middle-aged like me, right? So RoboCoping me at Duke Medical Center, and I did an executive internship with a company called Exeger and their government services, which was working in supply chain risk management using some AI capabilities. Super fun stuff to troll through and protect our supply chains at scale and diversify our supply chains. From there, I had started a relationship based on supply chains with Hinz Consulting. I really liked the people at Hinz. They just had the right fit and culture. And one day they said, hey, we keep walking into these APMP conferences and we don't see even our proposal sign anymore past the 31 different 40 different tech companies. And if you've been to an APMP event, you're like, wow, it's everywhere. And Hinz ran into that as well. For them, they were taking a little bit different approach, and that approach, I was fortunate, involved me. They had one competitor put training up really quick, proposed to be the AI experts, right? And they're pretty good at functional training and teach you some terms, right? Had another competitor go and say, hey, we're going to hire some Microsoft engineers and we're going to copy some software for some of these AI companies and make our own. Innovative idea, but they may get sued for it. But you don't sue someone until after they have a revenue stream. So you never know when that's going to come here in the future. Their approach was a little bit different. And Hinz is based on, and the thing I like is super empowering people. We've got 320 proposal experts, right? And they live everywhere in the country, probably right next door to you, and you may not even know it, right? We've got about 40 full-time employees, and we're kind of people first, and we always wanted the best people and the best quality, right? So that was the start of the mission. We're like, okay, so AI Center of Excellence, but we're really talking about people, right? You rang my passion bell, and here we go. So the first thing I did and set out to do, and this is really important, when you don't know something, go out and surround yourself with the experts. We found several different, 4 different proposal managers, brought them in, and they started to evaluate the technology. And some of the decision criteria we're going to share today is actually all those criteria are made by people just like you that were getting paid to just immerse themselves in technology the whole time, right? And I'll be the first to tell you I'm not a proposal expert, though I've been trying to learn as much as I can, but I surrounded myself and we built things around practitioners. That's how we tend to think about the technology in the center of excellence. So with that, we made all these criteria and we started down selecting and evaluating all sorts of different platforms. So as we're going along here, we started to evaluate and look at it, and we started to break down functionality. All of functionality, security was a big thing to us if you're in government, but also what do we want to do and how do we want to impact processes? And that's what we spent a lot of our time doing. That's the journey so far. I'm going to go into some analogies to help us think about AI.
Yeah, let's pull and see how many people are gonna, you mentioned attending the conferences and kind of being inundated.
Conferences can be boondoggles, right? And talking with Rick Harris a lot, the CEO of APMP, he said, some people thought like that's what conferences were supposed to be, and he really trying to change it to education when he took over or came in. And I would say it absolutely is that. But the number one thing you learn there and the people you learn from are actually from the peers, right? So walking around and finding new friends, right? But really finding other experts like you and then going around and looking at the booths or looking at the technology at the same time or going to the seminars. The real learning comes from the conversations after you get stimulated and you see something. And it's really hard to get that anywhere else. So if you can make the time for yourself, I highly recommend going. We're not in a competition race with AI and AI replacing you. You are in a competition race with other proposal professionals who are enabling themselves with technology skills and who are going to have the capability to use the technology. So make no mistake about it, that race is on, but it's still a human to human race, right? And just like we all improve ourselves or we invest in ourselves to do some education, it's got to be a lifelong thing. And there is no time that's more important to do that than right now. In our lives with the AI era approaching, kind of similar to 20 years ago when the tech came in. Like this is another piece where you have to evolve or we won't survive, right, as individuals in all of our professions.
I'm so glad you said that. And even earlier about the human factor of all this. People have to create. We do that differently than computers do. I think a lot of us think about that a lot throughout our day.
When I talk about AI and where we are right now, AI started or kind of came on scene about 10 years ago. The AI era for me is kind of like the age of the automobiles, right? Imagine going from horse to automobiles, right? And imagine that first automobile in your head, right? You got that Model T and it moves along and it's not too fast, right? And they all kind of look the same, right? And then what did you have? You had proliferation of skills to make them and proliferation of the technology, and you started to get specialization of the automobile, right? Everybody can imagine from the old time movie, the big box grocery truck in New York City moving around, right? Delivering the groceries, right? Not making the street smelly. You can imagine the wide tire, the bigger tire one that was, starting to move around on farms and country roads, kind of like you saw in Legends of the Fall, right? Out there moving around, right? You got the race car that starts to proliferate for the rich. And that's kind of what happened. So if you imagine 10 years ago, with AI, you had AI and the discipline forming, and you've had the proliferation of skills. So a lot more engineers getting trained, specialization. You can actually become an AI software engineer now, which that major didn't exist 10 years ago, but it does now, right? And you start to get AI specialization. So think about the AI out there, AI for marketing. In our industry, we've got AI for pricing, AI for go-to-market, scraping opportunities. We've got generative AI for creating content, of course, right? Or generating content, not creating, generating content. And then we're really good at like some really cool like imagery AI. If you want to make Josh a liger, like cool, you can do that. It's not great with business graphics, but it's going to get solved or figured out eventually as the technology advances as well. So that's kind of where we are. And that's why I say, okay, where are we, right? Sometimes you just got to pause, right? In my line of work, we used to always say the 3 rules of the Green Beret were always know where you are, always be cool, and if you don't know where you are, be really, really cool, all right? So, we just had to take a quick pause to know where we are, right? And I can't see you all, but I'm sure you're looking cool. Moving on to the second example, right? And this is like what's happening with GenAI. And you've got these terms, domain aware AI, right? A domain, simple, keep it simple, point of departure. Imagine email, right? Microsoft, or we'll say Ford, does not keep all of its emails in the same place as GMC emails, right? Everybody has their own email domain. It's not unlike that for your better AI products. Really important thing to learn. So using a Copilot, using a Chat GPT, getting subscriptions to things like that, or some of your open source capabilities, you're still in this domain and information space with everybody else. It's unsecured. You also have to remember that every time that you put in a question, it gets to keep the question and the generated output, which feeds back into the large language model, and it could pop out again. If I take a paper and I say, hey, improve or change all the grammar or make active voice, and I put in my 4-page paper, that paper is now in there, right? There's a professor here at Purdue, and he said, hey, I had a paper, I just wanted to edit and like change the format for everything. I put it in, told it to do that, it did it. I'm like, this is awesome. And guess what? I searched my paper and found it later on, or elements of my paper. In another instance, he had a question that he put in. I said, write me something on this. They gave him like 6 pages. He's like, I can turn this into a journal article. Then he went to Google Journals, search the information, and it was 95% of the same thing as somebody else, right? So when you're playing in this open space without your own domain, it's just like, man, I'm looking at this email from someone. Oh, wait, it's not to me, right? It's not in your own domain, right? Or they wrote an email I thought to me, but wasn't, right? So there's products out there, and it's probably you get what you pay for. They're going to be much lower price that don't have their own domain. They're really good for doing cool tricks, but realize you don't want to risk IP if you're a LLC or a small LLC, right, or 1099. You don't want to risk the IP of someone you're working for by editing things really fast in an open source tool, right? Because it is out there and is not in a closed domain. It would be like putting your emails or putting that company's emails. You're probably not going to be working for them as a 1099 very long.
Question for you on that, Josh.
Yeah.
Companies that are taking underlying open source technologies and building a platform, a more robust tool for proposal professionals, but still the underlying tech is that, are those still some concerns with your security, like it's still out there in that domain?
Yeah, it's all about the agreements and how they have their own large language model that they've paid for and built, supercomputing arrangements where the data storage is located. There was one company that I won't say here on the call, but they were a proposal management software company, and they were trying to add in GenAI really quickly. So they got a third-party data provider to store it that you didn't sign an agreement for, that you didn't know about. And then they had a third-party GenAI company that they hired that then was using the data, and then they were using 2 open source tools that didn't have the agreements in place, and you got your data still exposed 4 times to 4 people you didn't agree with that was also teaching large language models, right? So knowing what you're buying, right, is something that's important, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the actual decision tree later on in our 2-part series here. So when we say domain, that's what we mean. A domain is only generating or pulling from your body of information. There's some cool tools out there like AutoGen that you can select or deselect where it's pulling from. I like AutoGen because I can kind of do both, but anytime you have that link, right, there is an exposure component to that as well, right? So they're kind of a best in breed for mixing both, right? But that also creates a lot of problems for FedRAMP and security and things like that. There's other tools out there like Rohirrim that's completely closed domain, a lot less creativity. It's only generating from your own content, right? As we kind of move along here, Wheel of Fortune, right? This is a silly analogy that I hope you've never heard before. And what is happening with GenAI? It vectorizes things. You'll hear that, a vector database, right? All right, what it's doing is it's taking your documents and it's putting them and breaking everything down in there into syllables, right? And the large language model has been trained on like everything out on the internet prior to 2021. Now it's up to 2023. And so it's got this massive database of syllables and essentially probabilities attached to it of what logically comes next based on the words before and the words after. And it's essentially like a giant probability wheel, right? That's spinning really fast each time, right? And it's super smart, and it ties in words together, right? It's vector calculus, right? It's not straight calculus. It's extremely complicated. But I look at it, and in my mind, the easiest way to look at it is a Wheel of Fortune, right? So imagine a Wheel of Fortune, and I've got information in the audience there, and all that information in the room. There's a lot of information, like a few hundred people in the Wheel of Fortune room. Well, imagine your company domain is only putting on the little triangles on the wheel information from your company. So right off the bat, I've collapsed the information down to just the wheel. And the third piece is when you ask your question from a probability standpoint and based on the context, based on the natural language, it's going to cover up spaces on the wheel and you can't land on those anymore, right? Kind of like when they're covering things on the Wheel of Fortune board. And then you spin in the probability wheel, and that's why it's never going to be the same each time that you generate. You can ask it the same question 3 times. It's never going to generate exactly the same. And it's contextual, so you're going to get a good answer, but essentially it's not going to be the same answer. And sometimes they'll be very similar. Well, that's because guess what? After I say Bob on the internet, probabilistically, the word after it's Dylan, like most times, or Bob is, right? It's trained on these probabilities. As you use the system, it can slightly adjust that, but think about a giant fountain that's filled with dimes. I tell my kids to go in and there's like 1 penny in there. And I say, go in and find me the penny, right? And every time I pull out a penny or every time I pull out a dime, I get to replace it with a penny. It takes a long time still to change the probabilities of what they're likely to go down and dive under and come back up with, right? What is high in vector calculus? I think, and what is a domain? I look at it as your Wheel of Fortune. And there's essentially 3 things that are happening all of the time. And that is the question, the brain, the large language model brain, right, in their context, and then the domain and where it's pulling the information from. That's happening every time you spin the wheel really, really fast, right, in a closed domain. And that's how it's actually generating answers. So you hear me say generate, and I never say it's creating, because I say only humans are creating still. It has about, the GenAI systems have about 46 billion data points, and the human brain has about 1,000 billion data points. Nothing can still do what the human brain can do. But what do computers do better than humans? It does math really well, right? So it generates, based on vector calculus, math really fast, really well. And that is the human to AI handshake right now. It can generate that base fast, and then we add that compelling empathetic nature to win.
Now, we as people can train that wheel, right? And train the models to become more sophisticated.
The models will learn over time because it's going to take your information and feed it back in. You know, it takes a while to do that, right? But you know, some of the systems, if I start using a document more than other documents, it's going to go to that document, right? Or it's going to reference it more. So it will retrain the system over time. But the biggest influence on what it's pulling from is based on your question. And then with your domain, it's only going to pull things from the wheel, from your domain, right? And that's why when we're looking at systems and system selection, getting something where you upload your information or the system ties into your information is really important, because then it sounds like you. It has your differentiators, right? If we've only got quarters and pennies in this fountain and I send my kids down to pull one out, it's going to come out with a quarter and a penny and not like a dime like the other fountain, right? So when you get your own domain, you've got the natural language, the brain that's and the LLM, that's the brain that's driving it, but it's pulling from your information, which makes it your differentiators. It sounds like you, it reads like you. I have a whole folder where I took 30 emails, I redacted them, but they had different templates and different purposes, and they're just my emails. So when I tell it to write an email, it sounds more like me. It writes more how I write, right? And so it's a little bit less robotic and sounds AI because it's ones that I've written. They sound like me. And that's, you know, one of the things we're after when we're looking at a tool. Do I go cheap? Do I go expensive? Do I go open source? Do I go something closed? If you're working for a company, if you're working with something with IP, if you're tying into government at all, the domain is going to give you the security, and it's also going to give you a much higher quality in your first run, right? Which is what we're after. That's one of our ROI components. So when you get a product, or when we're talking about products, there's learning the functionality of the product. But one of the questions that no one has fully solved, and that's the proposal process, right? That's how practitioners use it. And all of our people in the AI CoE, we're kind of specializing in where we use it for different reasons, and based on how we use it, or based on companies we know and where we can get the most benefit out of the systems, right? Imagine, we'll start with our horse analogy first, right? and you're on a horse, and imagine you wake up in the morning, right? And you got to saddle up the horse. You probably got to get some water, give some food, right? On your way to work, right? You may have to rest it on the way. You can't gallop the whole way depending on how far you live, right? Got to find a place to tie it up, saddle it up. Does that place have water? Come down from work every once in a while, make sure it's okay, right? And then take it back home at the end, right? Well, imagine suddenly that you're advanced into an autonomous vehicle, no fueling, no feeding, no saddling, right? And then, wow, I don't even have to drive it. I can do other work while I'm in it. How does that change my day? Can I start my work day later because I can take meetings from the car? Like, does it make a more efficient route and it actually gets me there faster based on that time savings? Maybe I get there early and I network with colleagues. And you're like, well, this is kind of changing. But the first thing you probably do is just day one is get in the autonomous vehicle, and you're like, and you probably start at the same time you went out to saddle up the horse, right? Because you kind of got to ride it a few times before you know the advantages or what you can even do, how you would change the schedule. You know, there's this piece of functionality that we're all learning, and the products are changing really, really fast. So with everything changing so fast, we're kind of in this state that we don't even know what the full capabilities are, which makes it really hard to adjust processes. Though we're just starting to do that now, and we're advising companies how to do that. That change management is probably going to be an ongoing thing for years to come as the tech changes really fast before it stabilizes, right? And so the last thing I'd say is when I start thinking about technology, and let's take the laundry. Does everybody may not do laundry, right? The question I ask is, where are you as the size of company you're doing? And I look at laundry, I use laundry as a comparison for my process. And it's the first question I ask when I'm thinking about what technology I need. And that question is, do I have a process for making my proposals? You know, if you're living at home, you may not have a process because your mom does it, right? If you're a tech startup, you may be just coming out from living from home and you may not have a process. Do I have a process? Do I need a process? What's my process look like? Even if it's just in my living room, the process may be short, but it's right there, right? Why do I say this, right? Let's think about the process. I got some kids and I got to collect up the clothes off the floor usually, unfortunately. I'm working on that part. I got to put them in the basket. Then I take the basket down. I take my basket of laundry down to the creek, and I get my washing board and I wash the clothes on the washboard, and then I hang the clothes on the clothesline for 6 hours, right? The washboard takes me about an hour, 2 hours sometimes sitting there. Then I've got the clothesline, then I pull them down, and then I fold them and I put them back in the drawers, right? Let's just say that's my process. If I've got one, that's great. At that point, if we want to move to our tech example, if I've got a process, what gives me the most value? Does getting software out there that's proposal management software give me the best gain? Well, I kind of already have a process. What would the gain be if I was going to invest in something if in my process I bought a washing machine or a dryer, right? And I could replace 1-2 hours at the river or 6 hours on the drying line, putting it up and down with a washing machine or a dryer. And I throw this out there because when I walk into an APMP conference or when I search for software online, and I want you to do the same thing when you're looking or when you walk into the conference. And this is like a Gen 1 slide for me. It's a little more complex now, but I want to show this out because in my first day in this industry, this is kind of what I saw. What I saw was, okay, there was, if I kind of tried to capture the capture life cycle here at the bottom, right? I've got qualifications and go to market side. Management's really kind of pervasive throughout, but I just stuck it in the middle. Then I've got developing the proposal, right? Which there's a lot of writing in there. That's where GenAI is sitting. And we've got some pricing software I saw out there. We got perfected down here. They're not really, you know, GenAI up here, but they're editing software. And I just kind of dumped them on this map. I was like, you know, everybody has the word AI on there, but like, okay, what are you really, right? What are you at your core? And for me, this grouped into, I've got a bunch of stuff out there that's heavily management software that is the laundry process. And I've got a bunch of them out there that are trying to invent and create the washing machine and the dryer, right? If you don't have a process and you're super disorganized, you know what's going on, and you're fairly big, you may need to invest, or you may need to make your priority the management software. It may really help you out if you need better team collaboration, processing, tracking of documents, right? Maybe that is your priority for your ROI. If you've already got a solid enough process, nothing's going to change your life like the ability to generate high quality output, like adding the washing machine, the dryer. I've got my go-to-market up here. To me, that's it's a whole nother field that we have associations with. We watch, right? It's kind of getting my kids' clothes from the floor into the baskets there, to stay with our analogy a little bit at the end, and the pricing at the end is kind of putting them back in their rooms, right? Now, what's my total time take? This is where I kind of break stuff down. It's a very simple way to do it. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of change for a second. All right, so I don't know if the laundry analogy worked, but essentially, I talk about that because you can associate time. It's a visual. It's something that most of us have to do, and you can imagine when we're making decisions about technology, all this stuff has a cost, and in the end, like, there's costs and there's benefits, right? There's an ROI, a return on investment for things. So you've really got to start to think about, okay, what gives me the most value, and what are my gaps? What are my gaps as a company, or as a proposal shop? And where do I need the most help? Where do I think I can get the most benefit? You've got to constantly, through the AI tool process selection, or a technology tool process selection, keep the ROI in mind. And that's just an easy way that I always kind of remind myself. Now, with that said, this is only going to last so long that this hard decision is going to be in place, right? And that's because everybody's making moves. Tons of these companies aren't full companies yet. I know they are full companies, right? But they're in Series A, which is they've taken on some investment money, or B, they've taken on some more money because they're going to make it, or Series C. Some of them are all the way like fully invested. Some of them are very, very emerging, right? And ultimately, though, a lot of them are trying to do the same thing. The GenAI companies have gotten the demand signal. This is great, but I wish it had a shredding feature too. This is great. How do I work collaboratively rather than just one person generate a great answer? How do I work collaboratively on the answers? Or how can I look at somebody else's prompts in my team, right? How can I make prompting archives, right? That said, the proposal management companies are like, wow, we've got some great we've got some great software for management and managing the process, but their clients are saying, hey, what's this GenAI thing? Like, hey, don't look at them, right? Keep your investment here. We're going to add that too. So they're trying to add other components or GenAI into the overall process, right? The problem is, if anyone's read the book Good to Great, right, it's hard to be good at a lot of things. And specifically in this, software engineers are all software engineers to me, but there is definitely a difference between companies that have the expertise to do the software, and companies that have the expertise to make AI software, right? They're two different kind of skill sets and disciplines. Imagine like electrical engineers do electrical work, civil engineers do bridges and road construction. And to me, they're just all engineers, but they're definitely different disciplines, right? And so you've got to kind of reform your company. You may have to take on investment to hire the right people, to integrate the softwares together as you're trying to build on new things, is sometimes clunky, and not all of them are going to make it as well, right? There will be market share consolidation. That's why I watch the business metrics on some of the companies as well. You can see I've got the future here up at the top, and they're all trying to climb or get to that, and eventually you'll have a completely integrated platform with a bit from the front end, the back end, editing, the management, and the pricing at some point here in the future, right?
Yeah, and as we get towards the end of this, I just want to say, we're just kind of scratching the surface. It's a lot to information to absorb. So, don't forget to join us on this part 2 series where we get a little bit more into the weeds, a mile deep with some of the stuff. My question for you would be, at this point, a lot of the APMP members have said, hey, my company or my job employer doesn't let me use AI tools. What advice would you give them to say, hey, if that's the case, don't prohibit yourself personally or individually. Like, here's ways that you can still explore and educate yourself what advice would you give to those?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating question, right? So I'll give you a few things, right? Some people believe the government's going to keep us from using AI, right? They're starting to make us declare it on our proposals. I think NIH, National Institute of Health, was the first one that had you have to declare it whether you used AI. If we trace that back to how things span presidencies, and we could use a canary in the mine shaft like supply chains, it took about 3 years before the agencies fully got up and implemented how they wanted to handle some of the supply chain diversity things. And it actually had to span 2 presidents and 2 administrations. And it actually went Trump to Biden. They both had executive orders on the same topic, consistent. At that point, it signaled to everyone in the government agencies, hey, this is bipartisan. This is going to happen. We need to start thinking about this, right? So this has been underway for about a year. You're seeing agencies start to talk about it. You're seeing agencies start to approach some of these AI companies for, hey, we want a technical solution on the backside to evaluate. It's coming, but I would say it's not coming in the way the naysayers say. Similar to university software that they can take a paper, feed it in, and figure out whether you've plagiarized. What we're probably going to see is that companies will still be allowed to use AI, but they're going to very easily be able to tell when they run it through the software on the backside to see if you used open source to generate your responses. Now, why would that matter? Potentially, if you're feeding questions for an RFP, it leaves bits and trails and things that can be used for information that leads to intelligence for foreign governments, right? But probably more importantly, it would say, hey, if you generated this with open source, it probably has elements and differentiators that your company doesn't actually do. It pulled it in from the World Wide Web, multiple companies. I'm not confident you can do this. So ultimately, what I think we'll go to is just like the emails and security, it's going to be, did you use AI? Which AI platform did you use? Do you have your own GenAI domain? Are you pulling only from yourself? And they're going to run your proposal through the system and be able to tell whether you use open source. So it's not a matter of whether you're going to be able to use AI. Like, I think the government's moving towards that, and they haven't said no. I think what they're saying is we're going to have you declare it, and eventually that declaration is going to be what system platform you use. Not unlike in proposals, if you're tied to information right now, you got to declare, like, what's your data security like? What cloud platform do you use? Is it approved by the government, right? That's probably the direction we're going. The second piece is if you've got leadership that's saying we're not going to use it, we can't use it, I would probably argue that people in the company are using it, and the biggest security is not giving them a safe option. I know my kid's going to do X. They're going to eat food and sneak snacks. Am I giving them the safe snacks in the closet and not the ones that are just going to rot their brain and are pure sugar, maybe, though we have those too in the house. So it's given the right options, right? And I think that's the direction the government's going to go. If I was betting on it based on how you read the executive orders and some of the communication negotiations that are happening with some of these tech companies right now. And then for your leadership, you got to give your people a safe option because they're going to do it. They're going to talk about it. They're going to learn about it. For you, if you're not allowed to use it at your company, you've still got a responsibility to be competitive and make yourself competitive. Back to the beginning of the conversation with the contest is not between you and AI. The contest is between you and people that know how to use technology. And I would say, there's a lot of ways you can train something without training it, right? How do I get to work? Do I walk, or do I my 800 meters, or do I drive my car the 800 meters? Well, if I walk, I'm getting some exercise in, I'm getting muscle memory, I'm getting practice, I'm getting strength, I'm using my lungs, right? So in that same vein, when you write your kid's birthday invitation, use Copilot right there on the Microsoft site, right? If you're going to write an email to your friend, if you're going to write your Christmas newsletter, use AI in all these other tasks. One, it'll probably make you more efficient, and two, it's a way to train and build muscle memory on how you interact with it, how you prompt and talk to it. You'll hear me say prompt crafting, not prompt engineering, because prompt engineering is a whole discipline in college now, right? We're more crafters, right? Trying to figure out how to interact with it, not unlike we figure out how to talk to our colleagues and people or interns or whoever we have, right? So Does that answer your question or help out a
Yeah,
little bit?
that's spot on. That's such a good point, right? They're going to use it. And it's better for you to get ahead of that, talk to them, educate them about what it is, and then provide something that you feel comfortable with. I think, being for the special forces community, the government is going to be using AI, but there has to be a process for them to make sure it's secure, it's not compromised. There's adversarial threats, there's quantum computers, they're injecting, they're data poisoning models, AI models at the edge. And in those tactical environments, right, all the critical decision making is made at the edge. AI is used at the edge. So we got to protect it. We got to make sure it's safe and that we're not just running with this new car and we don't know how it works, but we're going to go 100 miles per hour, right? It gets dangerous at that point. So I do think our future, the government as well, private sector, these big companies are going to be using it for operations.
So we're just going to talk preview about what we're going to talk about next time. Next
Awesome.
time, we're going to talk a little bit about evaluation criteria and a decision. We're going to go through a really basic decision tree, but ultimately, criteria all comes into making criteria for yourself and for your own company about the differentiators within the technology or the tool features that matter to you. And we've got a little bit of homework, right? If you've got the time, and that's what things matter to you. What are the gaps with your company, right? Do you have that process? Do you not have a process, right? Do you have a way to collaborate? Do you even need one, right? Do you need help generating, right? Do you not have any great writers? Are you having trouble accessing your SMEs? Are you guys missing deadlines because you can't get your graphics people engaged, right? Or you can't get your SMEs engaged or get the information back to add that empathy and one voice everything. So, start thinking about the criteria when you're evaluating a platform that matters to you. And I've got some macro ones here for you to think about before we meet again, right? And that's, we bucket it into security, quality, speed, and services. And within that, with security, we're heavily thinking, do they have their own LLM? Let's say it's unsecure, there are third parties that are unsecure. Are they FedRAMP? Where do they house the data? Or do they come into my environment? If they house the data somewhere, is it on a government approved system like Azure GovCloud? Do they have security ratings for it? And where are their people, right? You can have all the technical security at once, but if they've outsourced for really, really low cost to, somewhere in a threat company, or they don't background check or have a way of vetting people, that can be a danger as well to your own IP. When we go through quality, this is kind of the system performance. You're looking at, does it actually sound like me when my information's in there, right? Or whatever environment they've set up to demo for you, right? Like you want to know, okay, what's your environment? Is it, okay, all your stuff in there is Acme Company. Let's see if it can generate and really sound like Acme Company. Or during a pilot, does it sound like me? You're looking at, does it combine text from multiple artifacts, or does it really just use text from one piece? And by artifact, I mean document. Can it fuse together concepts to truly answer the engine or answer the question, right? Does it have references in it? Because references are pretty important if you need to cite something. Can you select different things and choose, right? GenAI in general, we think is great for making the writing, right? Create the paper, solve the blank paper, but it's really useful as a research assistant, which is the first thing we do before we write. Understand the problem, collect the information, then we usually write. It's really good at research assistant, but can it fuse together and allow you to select the best references for your question? Are there workflows in there? Is it just basic generation, or is it actually proposal workflows in there that kind of helps you potentially save time? Is it optimized for commercial proposals or government proposals, right? What is the speed of generation? How long does it actually take between queries? It's not going to be as fast as Google that says 0.25 seconds, right? Because it's actually generating and fusing things together for most of the AI that you're using for GenAI. For services, how much training do they offer? Like, do they help you with ingest? Do you do it yourself? Do they have continuous process improvement support? How do they give you updates if the tech is changing? A lot of them are changing things and it just appears and the system has changed and there's no notification on how to use the new functionality, right? And then what's their the contract of service support look like? Is your license maybe a year, but frequently your support or training will only last like a few weeks, and then they're completely self-service, right? They do that to save cost, at lower costs, and keep their overhead and evaluation high as a technical platform rather than a managed service provider. So these were just a few of the pieces. We're going to go through the one more slide. These can get really complicated. This was a company looking at how to evaluate. Here was the criteria they came up with, rated some products, gave them scores 1 through 5, overlaid them, and you got this really fancy, really hard to read, overwhelming chart. But the point is, I wanted to show you another way that a company did tool evaluation and the criteria they used, right? We've seen and we've helped a bunch of companies do things like this as they select and evaluate tools, right? So if you're going down that journey, we're always happy to talk with you as well. So I'm not going to go into these in detail today based on our time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does Hinz Consulting have a tool, or do you guys just consult when companies are looking to evaluate a certain?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one, we're tool agnostic. So there's a lot of tools out there for you, and maybe I do the car analogies too much, but I get to be like the car dealer that isn't just selling sports cars, right? Like, we want you in the right tool right for you. You may need a minivan, you may need a truck, you may need a sports car, right? You may need a fuel efficient car. So with tool selection, we're completely agnostic, and we run it the tool selection based on understanding you and then down selecting into the tool. We do have like 8 preferred partners, and then we use about 3 different tools, and in some cases we use multiple tools in sequence for an output. Like, I use one tool for shredding, and I use one tool for the generation and one tool for the editing at the end, right? I love perfected at the end because it always de-robofies the AI. And it's really interesting you ask, because not everyone can afford a tool, much less 3, or a whole proposal team of experts. And just in the last 9 months, we've created a product, and it really gives someone fractional access to experts and fractional access to different platforms and to a platform. And we call it a draft proposal package. And essentially what we did is we said, hey, making a compliance matrix with an expert, making an outline, making a 20-page draft, doing some graphics, and then DTPing it would have cost $11,000 before. A lot of money for a company and taking a lot more time. So now we've leveraged a bunch of technologies together, and we offer just a fixed price product rather than the person, and we do it for half the price, right? So we still win, the people win, and that's the synergistic nature of technology that I love. Everyone can truly win, right? Everyone can simply do the laundry faster, and everybody wins. The kids got
nobody needs to be going to the river with their wash.
That's right. No one's going to the river right now, right? Or hanging out on the laundry line, right, when the tornado whips through, right? So we've created some cool products in passing on cost savings and really give people fractional access to our people and to AI. Some of the things we've done. We have strategic partnership agreement worked out with them to make it efficient, and so we use everything with very tight security controls between companies, and as we always have done with our people too, right? We just kind of mimic that and keep the same principles in mind. And what it allows us to do is, you give us a proposal or an RFP, and we'll give you back that draft, that 20-page draft with compliance matrix in under 4 days. And that gives you all the time at the end for the empathy, or if it's a task order, to answer it within the 10-day window. And you just provide the finish and your expertise at the end. But we're generating pretty high quality off of everything that we have that we've pulled in from you.
That's great. That's great. That's such a great service. Coming from a small business tech startup, even to working at some of the mid to bigger shops, you can see the use case there. So I'm excited for part 2. There's a lot to discuss. This was super easy to understand, a very complex subject matter. So thank you for making this last hour, understandable and engaging. And don't miss out, guys. November 7th, we'll send out all the things. We're going to dive deep into our part 2. We also have October 29th, the Top Golf Denver, North Denver. We're going to do that. So those folks that are up by Thornton area, come meet us. We'll be there doing some driving, hitting some balls. And yeah, so thank you. This was great. Awesome topic, Josh. Thanks so much.
All right. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's pretty easy to find me online.
They already found you, it looks like.
Yeah, right. Like from one of my emails, I think, right? I have my phone number.
Yeah,
Or a
that's
business
great.
card. All
Yeah,
right.
well, everybody
Everybody
have a
take
great
care.
day. Thank you so much for making time, Josh, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.